Good afternoon. My name is Crystall Ellingsen, and I have lymphedema. It has been a long, long road. I only found out about 3 years ago, so I've had it for about 30 years, and it is overtly obvious now that I know what it is. But for those 30 years, I have struggled in pretty much every capacity you can. When I learned I had lymphedema, the lack of awareness, the lack of professionals, the lack of knowledge, especially from a Canadian perspective, I was deeply concerned about. So I decided that I was going to create some of my own content based on what I've learned from people in the US. I've read journals from professionals in Germany. Those are probably the two best countries when it comes to information about not only professionals, treatment, the community as well. So I decided, well, how do I approach this? So the way to lymphedema came from that, and my website is thewaytolymphedema.com. I was thinking that I would like to share that with you. It has the emotional journey that we're on as patients of chronic diseases, the financial burden that I bear as a result of my condition, the physical burden of pain. Pain is a big motivator. When we talk about motivation, pain is a huge motivator. Next slide. So lymphedema can appear at any stage of life, but usually presents a time of hormonal change. I was a big kid. I came from a big family. Little did I know it traveled in my family, and it's often a result of, you inherit this disease. That word escapes me right now, but it's hereditary. It's hereditary. So when I started puberty, I was really motivated to lose weight. I lost 60 pounds, and I started playing sports. It was the 90s. It was the early 90s. And, Susan Powerhead wrote her book on weight loss, and The Zone was in the house, and my mother wanted to save me from all of the things that she experienced. And unfortunately, she wasn't able to because she had lymphedema as well. I lost 60 pounds. I trained every day. I did legs of steel. I did abs of steel. I don't know if any of you are part of that generation. And I trained for volleyball. I played baseball. I played basketball. I played badminton. I love sports. I love being challenged, and I love working hard. But when I went to my doctor, he's like, "You're still 40 pounds overweight. Like, what are you going to do about that?" I was already on a heavily restricted diet. And there wasn't too much I could cut out without sacrificing my energy levels. So this is me in 2002. I was teaching in Korea as English as a second language. And you see in the picture, I'm super lean. On the top, I played badminton several times a week with some locals at this really cool place, and I walked a lot. I ate pretty much whatever I wanted because everything is pretty much meat and vegetables. It was delicious. I felt like a celebrity everywhere I went because I looked so much different than everybody else. But the large hips and thighs weren't causing me pain at the time, but they inhibited my ability to participate in sports the way I wanted to. So after being in being in Korea, I met a girl there from Australia. I came back to Canada. Teaching here was super competitive getting into programs in my province, which is Nova Scotia. Lots of Nova Scotians at the time were going to Maine to do their teaching degrees. And I thought, why should I go to Maine when I can go to Australia? So I applied. The first university that came back and said I could go, I took off. My parents, bless their heart, co-signed a loan. I got a student loan, which I've had all the way through, and I took off to Australia to do my teaching degree. And there, I met this cutie pie. This is my husband, Dan Ellingsen. He's such an amazing person. And he has supported me through all of this. Having a chronic disease that impacts your ability to live, impacts your ability to be a good mother, impacts your ability to move. And he never, ever, ever thought about doing something else or leaving. It was never on the table, but I know for a lot of chronically ill people, marriages don't last. It's hard. And he has been with me through every step of the way. So on my way home, I got pregnant. I stopped in Norway. His parents were so welcoming. And about 6 weeks in, I had a positive pregnancy test. And that's my first little girl. Her name's Solveig. And I was able to maintain my weight through really strict regimens of exercise and strict calorie reduction. So one led to more. My husband loves being a father, and he's super great at it. After I had Solveig, which is the tallest in the middle, I had a miscarriage a little over 2 years later. So that changes your pregnancies, your go forward, because there's a fear that you never had before. I got pregnant my next opportunity, which we are super blessed because we get pregnant super easy, and I know that's not the case for everyone. My next birth was a stillbirth. He had the cord wrapped around his neck, and he died. This is how I learned to advocate for myself. 3 weeks before his due date, I noticed things didn't feel quite right. He was a super active little baby in utero, and I mean little baby. He was pretty big, actually. He wasn't moving as much, and it was significantly noticeable. So I went to early labor, and I said, something doesn't feel right, he's not moving as much. And they're like, oh, you're close to the end of your pregnancy, don't worry about it. The heartbeat sounds good and strong. And I was like, can you look inside? They're like, that's not something we do. So I went home, and the next week, I felt even more stressed and had more anxiety. And I thought, oh, maybe that's because I had a miscarriage before. And I went back, and they said the same thing. Heartbeat sounds good, everything's great. And 3 days later, I felt a lot of movement, and I was like, oh, this feels so good, he's moving. But then I had a quick thought, and I was like, what if this is the last time I ever feel him move? And it was. Excuse me. He died that day. 3 days later, I went to see my doctor because I'd already been there several times, so I didn't go back right away. So I delivered him a day later. So after that, I realized that sometimes when you know something's wrong, you need to be more aggressive, more loud, not take their answer as the answer. Nobody looked inside. And I know it's not my fault, but of course there's guilt. And I said that won't happen again. So my next pregnancy, there was as many ultrasounds as I wanted. There was lots of care. There was people everywhere asking me if I was okay. But it took the death of a baby to get that kind of care. So I had Siri in the back next. And then I had little Sigva 4 years later. Now, during those pregnancies, unbeknownst to me, my lymphedema was getting worse and worse and worse. As mentioned before, lymphedema comes when you have large hormonal fluctuations. Started with puberty. Now I'm 5 pregnancies in. With my first, I started with some sacral discomfort. So sitting for long periods wasn't good for me. Just some slight touch by my husband, or if I hit it against something, it'd be super painful. After I had those 3 pregnancies back to back, after I had Siri, I noticed my legs and my arms were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I thought, oh, just like every other mom, you struggle with losing weight after pregnancy. And this is normal because lots of women gain weight during pregnancy. But the pain was starting to become unbearable. It was impacting my everyday life. And by the time 2014 came, when I had my son, my pain was so bad that I couldn't sit for more than 5 minutes at a time. I couldn't, my husband couldn't hug me. My kids couldn't sit on my lap. And it wasn't a warning sign. It wasn't a red flag. It wasn't anything for the medical community. Now, my doctor, she can't know what she doesn't know. And that's understandable. So I would talk about my pain. I would say how searing it is. And of course, the only recommendation is, if you just lost some weight, you feel better. But I was doing all the things that I had always done to maintain my weight. And after my little guy came along and the pain got really bad, I hugged my husband and I said, I can't do it anymore. I can't fail again. I'm so tired of failing. And he just supports me. So he's like, you always do the best you can, so if that's what you have to do now, that's what you have to do. I put on 40 pounds. And that really wasn't good for me. I was eating foods that were more inflammatory. Hindsight being 20/20, I understand that now. I lost the ability to walk one day. So I was still trying to keep up with some activity. I wasn't as strict with my diet, and I was going to Aquafitness. I went to the kitchen to get my water bottle, and I realized I couldn't walk to the kitchen. I was like, oh my God, I can't walk. And again, those things are big motivators. So I needed to find out why I couldn't walk. So it was plantar fasciitis. Why do I have plantar fasciitis? Because I'm heavy. And I put on, like I said, a lot of weight. And plantar fasciitis came over a long period of time, and I was like, well, that's my fault too. My weight's my fault, my pain's my fault, I can't walk, it's my fault. Wow. So when I know there's something wrong, I can address it. I'm motivated. If I know what the problem is, I can fix it. So I found out how I treat plantar fasciitis. So I need to take it more easy. I need to give it a rest. I need to let it repair, to ice it, to do rolling exercises, to get insoles in my shoes, to have indoor shoes. Now, this was a time where we didn't have a lot of money, but it's a real big priority to be able to walk. So I bought new shoes. I went and I got new insoles. It helped. I got back on my more stricter eating habits. I lost that 40 pounds, but once I lost that 40 pounds, I was stuck again. And what I've noticed is I can only be so successful, and that's why I felt like a failure all the time. I can never get lower than 250. Couldn't do it. No matter how much I worked out, no matter how much I restricted my diet. And I forgot I still have slides. So these guys are big motivators too. I need to look after these people. They depend heavily on me, and not being able to walk, not being able to take care of myself and take care of them, it's a hard pill to swallow. Lymphedema is often mistaken as obesity. So like I said, my doctors are just like, lose some weight. And we talk about toolboxes all the time in the last 2 days. And my husband talks about toolboxes a lot. You need more, and masks. Crystall, you need to put your mask on first. You need to put your mask on first. I didn't know how. because I didn't know what was wrong. And when doctors and healthcare professionals only have one thing in their toolbox, they have a hammer. And when you only have one thing in your toolbox, everything starts to look like a nail. So every person who comes in who is overweight has a problem with how much they eat and how little they move. No matter how little they know about me, no matter how little they know about how I live my life. And I believe them. In January of 2020, right before things shut down for COVID, I saw this pop up on my Facebook feed, and I saw that little image at the bottom on the side, and I was like, that little image looks like me. And I'm not really a clickbait type of person. Actually, I want to not do the clickbait because they want me to click on it. Little oppositional defiance that way. But when I saw that image, I thought, I'm just gonna see what this is. And when I watched this 54-minute video, it answered every single question I ever had about my body. All of them. Because a woman named Catherine Seo had the time, the resources, the wherewithal to investigate why she was sick and why nobody seemed to be able to help her. So when I know what the problem is, I can fix it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get the help that I needed here. Lymphedema, I found out, is approximately 1 in 10 women. 1 in 10 women in Canada will have lymphedema in their life. That works out right now to about 2 million Canadians. And they have no idea why they can't lose weight. And as their body grows, they're blamed by society, by their parents, by their healthcare professionals, because they're not disciplined enough, because they make bad choices, because they don't move enough. They've never heard of lymphedema. They often think I spelled lymphedema wrong, or that I said lymphedema wrong. Though not required for a lymphedema diagnosis, pain is often a hallmark of the condition. Like I mentioned before, I was in a lot of pain, and after my son came and I gained all that weight and I lost all that weight, the pain still continued. Now I took care of my plantar fasciitis because I knew how to treat it, because I can follow a treatment protocol. I can do as instructed. But if I'm trying to fix a problem I don't have, that's a huge problem. Some more of the symptoms around lymphedema include bruising, chronic fatigue, leg heaviness, and they're some of the most common lymphedema symptoms. You don't notice because it comes on slowly. When you're a teenager, your lymphatics are still performing really well. Even though your legs may be dimply, heavy, full of lymphedema fat, you just think you have cellulite because that's what you believe to be true. But as I got older, as the swelling started, I didn't realize that I was swelling because you are in a steady state of swelling. So your legs get heavier. I was starting to lose the formation in my legs, so the front of my legs, which you'll see later, came out several inches from here. And I've had two surgeries so far, one on my legs, that has really helped me with managing this condition. So it's characterized by the symmetrical buildup of fat tissue, which heavily affects your lymphatics, especially as you get older. It can move to anywhere on the body. For me, it was on my legs and bum when I was young. It moved to my arms, then eventually my stomach, after my 5th pregnancy. the cuffing at the ankle, and I noticed on one of the earlier presentations when there was a picture of the lymphedema, obesity, and another photo. The obese photo at the top, I believe, had as a picture of a woman with lymphedema because she had the cuffing on the ankles. And it was clear the fat around the knees, the fat pads in the front, the dimpling of the skin, all the things that are really just, they're an obvious sign of lymphedema. So here's a picture of, I maybe should have warned people for graphic content. This is a picture of healthy fat, which you see is, a little less red, larger amounts. They can grow and shrink, but the lipedema is very nodule, and the swelling around it and the inflammation causes it to become hard. So this particular fat is not metabolically active. So my body doesn't recognize it as an energy source. So it can't use it when it needs energy. So I found out I had lipedema. I dive deep. I dive incredibly deep. And I see MLD, CDT, and compression therapy. So literally the next day, I'm making phone calls and trying to find out where I get these resources in Halifax. There is one massage therapist who has a really great marketing campaign. He's right there when you pop up, when you look up swelling, lipedema, lymphedema, MLD. He's the first one that pops up. And I went and he said, stereotypical lipedema. He wrote a letter explaining to my doctor how my symptoms fit the diagnosis. Not that he's giving me a diagnosis, but that it fit. And my doctor was very much on board. She's like, I have no idea what this is, but how do we move forward from here? I gave her resources, we discussed talks, and she's like, once we find out if these therapies help you, we can look at a diagnosis. So I wasn't dismissed at all by my healthcare professional, which I know is not the case for many Canadians. CDT was torture. It was expensive. I couldn't do it the first year. I didn't have enough money. But he insisted that this is the gold standard of care for my condition. So after my year went around and I had my resources back for my my private health care, I went right away and I said, let's do this. Because if I know what to do, I can do it. I didn't know how challenging it would be. Like, yes, you have to waddle around. Yes, there's layer upon layer upon layer by bandaging. But I wasn't expecting the mental toll it would take on me. He says very common for people to be in fight or flight because their body is so busy processing all of the fluid, all the inflammation, which it never had to do. I was snippy with not that I'm never snippy with my family, but I could tell, it was like I had PMS times 1,000. Like it was horrible. I called my mother to come up and help me out because I couldn't do the housework, just bandaging, rewrapping, washing, hanging to dry, ironing, and then rewrapping. I had to do it 3 to 4 times a day because the way our bodies are shaped, they just keep falling and falling and falling. And this is about $4,000. So this is my legs pre-surgery last summer. Actually the summer before last, there was a lot of crying. A lot of crying. It's painful. It steals. I felt like it was a stealer of joy, compression therapy. I had ill-fitting garments. They were aggressive. I had trouble getting up the stairs. Yes, they improved the quality of my tissues. Yes, they improved swelling. But they stole in every other way. I found some groups online. Here's some of the ones that I followed first was Global Lipedema Awareness. I thought if this is the best we can do for women with lipedema, then we're not doing a good job. I'm not noticing an improvement in my quality of life, and there were times where I didn't want to live anymore. Or I would just let the lipedema take away my mobility in its entirety. I connected with a Canadian support group, and a lot of women there have found other resources. One of them being treatment. Treatment's not an option here. Places like Germany, the US, they cover lymphedema surgery, and it has a very high efficacy rate. And it's changing women's lives. It's literally giving them back their mobility for women who have been disabled. There's a small group of Nova Scotians, and I've been doing podcasts. I was on Sick Boy, the CBC podcast, talking about lymphedema. It was really informative. It was amazing. It has nobody's heard of lymphedema. The MLD specialists are the only people who can give me any recommendations. Not a doctor, not a physio, not a chiropractor, not a naturopath. It doesn't matter who I go to, I have to educate them on lymphedema. Dr. Gods was my first contact in Germany. I did contact somebody else, and his name's Dr. Giorgiani. My doctor and I talked. She said, where do we go from here? I gave her the US standard of care. We went through it together, all the things that I had done, the aqua fitness, the yoga, the diet, all things that helped me manage my condition, which I didn't even realize was helping my lymphedema. I was just looking for things to help me with my pain. But all of those things are actually in the standard of care to help you manage your condition. There's other women across Canada like Sandra. Sandra reached out to me to help support me in my journey for treatment. And there's a woman named Emma Clooney. She's doing a lot for the community. She has had a fundraising concert because Manitoba Health said they would cover her surgeries and then pulled that coverage away. She's a RN who had to leave her job years ago because her lymphedema was so painful she couldn't possibly work anymore. But our Canadian government would rather see us disabled than treated. So I decided to create more content. So this is a picture I would never, ever, ever, ever taken, ever. I spent years and years and years trying to hide my legs. I put my kids in front of my legs. I put tables. I put whatever I possibly can because they were embarrassing, extremely embarrassing. And the more I get to meet other women who have this condition, they give up promotions. They write under pen names so they never have to get their pictures taken. They have to physically leave their work because they can no longer do it. The amount of lost income earning potential for women because of this disease is astronomical, 1 in 10. This is my small group of Nova Scotia women. Emma had came over from Manitoba. We got together and had talks about where do we go from here. Now we're all struggling to figure out where we go from here, but we all know that what we're doing is not enough. I went to Germany for my first surgery. I made a joke on social media that bear had given me more the bear had given me more medical advice and care than almost anybody in Canada. They're all throughout Berlin. It's the city of bears. I went to the zoo with my husband, and I thought, this is fitting, because I feel like an animal on display all the time. I always have, because I don't look like other people. And now that I know I have lymphedema, I see it everywhere. And I approach people with a card and information, because I wish somebody had told me, because I know the medical community is not going to. So 2 or 3 days before I left for Germany, I had this great idea. Maybe I should make a journal. Maybe I should do a documentary. Maybe how do I get Canadian content? How do I talk about how Canadians are leaving and getting medical care in other countries? Because we can't get that hair here. We can't. It's not available. Now, my government says we have a specialist. When I ask them to name who they are, there's none. They won't name a single person. But they say these things for political reasons, but there's no backing behind it. So Dr. Gods was so accommodating. He answered all my questions. He performed the surgery, him and his team. And that's me immediately post-op. MLD is something that's very important post-operative. It saves tons of time and tons of money. People heal better, they heal faster, it requires less beds to be used. I want to create change in Canada. That's hard, because nobody wants to do anything different. But everybody wants to save money, everybody wants more beds. MLD changes the way you heal and can get you out of hospitals sooner. And the staff was amazing. This is my legs post-op. It's not for the faint of heart. It is a hard surgery to recover from. They removed 10.7 liters from my legs. But I was able to walk out of there feeling better than I had in a very long time. They sent me this little card. They have a cooking class. It's all about incorporating not only compression therapy, your mental health, what you eat is really important. He talks a lot about diet. And he just has a fantastic staff who care for you like your family. Traveling is tough when you just had surgery. People got out of the way to give me a seat so I could put my feet up. My husband is my new MLD therapist. Sexiest one I've ever had. No offense. Looking at you, Sarah. And I double compressed on this flight home because my volume had changed so much I was going to swell on the flight. So I was in misery. This is me laying in between the seats. That's how desperate I was for elevation. I had my suitcase underneath my legs. It helped, but after 9 hours in the plane, I was struggling. And there's Dan at Toronto Airport giving me more MLD. And it made a huge difference. Like even just having your partner or somebody who's with you just stroke your legs in a manner that comes back to your heart it really helped manage my pain and swelling. So this is surgery number 2. This was just over 3 weeks ago. And you'll see I'm wearing Bauerfeind because after years of struggling every day in compression, I finally found a brand that works for me. It's lighter, it's softer, it contains me, it doesn't move. Women with lymphedema are struggling to wear compression. They can't continue to be tortured. It's hard enough not being able to move because of the amount of fat tissue you have on your body and the amount of swelling. But if you put more restriction on them, the amount of adherence just doesn't exist. I think it's 6 weeks to 6 months, a vast majority of women who have lymphedema give up wearing their compression. So I have my arms, because I just got new Bauerfeind compression. Things are really expensive, so I didn't want to replace them right away. So instead of working on my legs, he worked on my upper body. And this is Emma, who's an entertainer / RN / lippy lady / advocate. She sang me to bed because I had so much anxiety. She said, "What can I do for you?" And she sang me a couple songs. So I left post-op, again, feeling way better than I had in a long time. And having the right compression post-surgery is super important. You can't heal properly, manage your swelling, manage cording, fibrotic tissue. You can't do those things without proper management. Now, it's expensive. Having MLD is expensive. But I didn't spend all that money to have surgery to not take care of myself post-op. I'm just glad I have access to debt, because not everybody does. So this is me before my first surgery. After my second, you see the difference in my legs. And yeah, that's me just a few weeks ago, post-op. These are things I want to do with my family. Last summer, I sat in the car for 2 hours and cried while my family took part in this activity that I wanted to do, but I can't afford to tear my compression. At the time, I knew surgery was coming. I couldn't afford an injury. I want to do things with my family, and I couldn't, but I will be able to very soon. I couldn't do these things with the support of my sister and her family and my parents. They move into my home and look after my kids while we're gone. And it's not easy, but they do it because they care, and I'm so thankful. And this is the first picture I ever took, displaying my legs when I first said we need more people showing what lymphedema looks like and talking about the type of care we need. And I'm wearing the same outfit today. Yeah, so I don't plan on replacing too much before all this is done. Well, thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Bauerfeind, for allowing me to come. And Amy has a short thing that she needs to share with you guys that she forgot yesterday, but it's super mind-blowing, and I think we talk about care for our conditions. They make a huge difference. It changes our lives.
Sure. You did so great.
Thanks. You remind me of me. I remind me of you.
That was really neat to hear about your surgery journey too. I think the future of care in Canada should be focused on integrative care so that we can get these surgeries if they help and we're the right candidates, but also to integrate all these other cool things that we learned about diet, yoga, exercise, and just self-care. It's such a big, big part. I forgot to share the little, because I was so nervous yesterday and so emotional. I forgot to share a little tidbit at the end, was that when I was telling you about all the struggling with my infections, is that, as you can see, my legs are quite a bit smaller now. And I had 26 infections before the age of 38. Since I've had my surgery 5 years ago on my left leg, I've been infection-free. So that's a huge relief, but it also gives my body a lot of time to heal too, to reduce that inflammation and just rest and recovery and rebuild healthy cells again. So I wanted to share that with you.
Thanks. If anybody wants more information about lymphedema, I have some Lymphedema Foundation from the US cards here.